one thing that people often tell me that there is a sense of hollowness. You might also experience things like asking yourself, what am I doing in this company? What am I doing in this field, in this job? That's a direction that you need to take.
On paper, your life looks perfect. Good title, decent money, you're respected. But when no one's watching, you whisper, what am I even doing with my life?
What are some habits or exercises for people to build onto themselves in terms of positive psychology?
If you love walking, just walk for 10 minutes and just focus on your walk and enjoy that walk and be there for yourself.
That's a very good way to look at life in general.
There's a silent epidemic among high performers. They're performing, but not living.
Is there any way to find out what are you naturally good at?
It's the road not taken, Jaslin. You can't go back and say, oh, if I'd done that, I would have been great. For people who are living a better quality life, they have a lot of these things, whether it's running, whether it's exercising, whether it's reading, whether it's something at work, whether it's playing bridge.
If you're feeling numb, misaligned, or like success doesn't feel like success, this episode might just be your reset button.
If you're enjoying Decoding with Jaslin, please consider subscribing to the channel. It makes a huge difference in helping us to bring you the kind of guests that you would like to see. We would also love to hear your opinions in terms of the topics and content you would be interested. So please drop in your comments to share your feedback. Thank you for giving us your time. Welcome to Decoding with Jaslin. If you've ever felt stuck or directionless, today's episode is for you. Today we have someone who has helped thousands find clarity and purpose, Vinesh Sukumaran. He's a globally recognized positive psychologist and leadership coach with over 2 decades of experience working with CXOs across Fortune 500 companies. He's the founder of Vinesh Sukumaran Consulting, a member of the Forbes Coaches Council, and an author of From Behavior to Wellbeing. What sets Vinesh apart is how he blends the science of positive psychology with deeply practical tools for growth. His work is rooted in helping people align who they are with what they do, whether in life, work, or relationships. In this conversation, we will unpack how to navigate feeling stuck, how to build optimism and clarity, how to audit your career for alignment, and how small mindset shifts can spark big change. Vinesh, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Jaslin. Thanks for having me on your show.
All right. I think I actually just want to jump right into the whole way you help people get clarity and get alignment, right? Um, so when you work with somebody, or if somebody is feeling a bit lost or directionless, or they're feeling stuck, what would be, sort of 3 questions you would recommend them asking themselves to even begin feeling that sense of clarity?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that I have experienced myself at some point, and I feel and experience certain things. But I think a better indicator is people who I've worked with, who I've coached, who I've spoken with. There are some recurrent themes which come up, and I think the first thing to do is to be aware of it, because sometimes you could be on autopilot and not realize that you're lost or directionless and just doing the motions again and again. So one thing that people often tell me when they're in that state is there is a sense of hollowness. They feel like they're doing something, but there's a feeling of hollowness. Sometimes they will even repeat that exact sentence. Also, there's a feeling of just asking themselves sometimes in their heads, is this all there is? Is that all there is to this trip, to this city, to this job, to this position, to this new car, whatever? They also, when you're to be aware of it, from time to time, you might also experience things like asking yourself, what am I doing? What am I doing in this company? What am I doing in this field, in this job, and so on? So that's the first step, I think, is to be aware of that, because if you're not aware, you're not even getting to that point where you can ask these questions. The second thing, if you are there and if you've sort of realized that, it's worth asking yourself, what really matters to me? What's important to me in life? Or even, sometimes when people have some problem and are admitted in hospital or diagnosed with something terminal, unfortunately, suddenly there's this sense of clarity, and people have spoken to me about it. People who are cancer survivors, who are survivors of different kinds, there's this great sense of clarity. So I think sometimes it's worth tapping into that before anything disastrous happens, asking yourself, if you have a month to do something, if you have a month left, maybe a year, but a month is even better. What is it that you would do? I think that brings in a lot of clarity and sense of direction. Uh, Maybe also there's a feeling that, a lot of people work towards comfort. And I want to be comfortable. What's going to make me comfortable? What's going to make me happy? But also asking yourself, what really makes me alive? And sometimes you might land in the middle of that comfort, that soft, cushiony pillow, and you realize, is this all there is? This is what I was after? But sometimes feeling alive rarely raises that question. So it's worth, if I had a choice, I would choose being alive than being just comfortable.
Understood. Very well put out, right? Being aware, then trying to figure out if, what is important, and then probably looking as what makes you feel alive, right? Now that sort of gives me a segue to what I want to ask next is what you said, right, are um, a bit philosophical, right? In terms of, okay, if I have a month left, what would I want to do? Um, but it's a little difficult for somebody to take it in a day-to-day life and implement that, right? Like if I am somebody who is working in a job and I am having these sort of doubts if this is what if this is it. Are there any exercises or some sort of activities or something that you can do to try to figure out, because there might be people who might not know clearly, right? Unless maybe they are on such a place, it might be difficult because a lot of people might say, oh, I like this also, I like this also, I like this also. I'm not very sure. Um, right. And this is giving me comfort, right? In the sense, okay, it gives me a good paycheck. Am I loving it? Maybe not, but it's giving me that sense of comfort. So is there something you can do to sort of figure out what is truly important for you in life and work?
Yeah, it also depends on how much time you have. Okay. So,
So assume, say, you have, say, 15 to 30 minutes and to figure out what can you do that would give you that sense of clarity to some extent, or even if it's like a daily exercise to do for a few days to help you with that.
there are a number of things that you could do. Here are some things which have worked for a lot of people, which I've done myself. It's a great idea to spend that 15 or 30 minutes writing. One way in which you can do it is just write. There's a popular book called The Secret Life of Pronouns by James Penbaker. And in that he of course talks about the use of pronouns and so on, but one of his findings was that just writing, and it doesn't matter what the content of that writing is, even if you write something meaningless, just writing every day clears up your mind and it brings more clarity into you. So that's one thing that people could do. They could write, and while you're writing, it's a good idea for you to write about some things that you want. Like, for example, there's a gentleman called John Goddard, who when he was 15 wrote down, I think, 135 or 140 goals, things he wanted to do. I think he still has a website. You go check it out, you'll see that. And by the end of his life, of course, he didn't tick off every one of them, but he ticked off about 109 or 10 or 15 of them, but that's quite a lot. So when you write these things down, one thing that it does is it helps you declutter, because sometimes there's a lot of stuff blocking the upper layers of your mind. It doesn't get you to think about your direction or where you want to go or what you really want. So one is just writing anything. The other thing is spending time writing down all the things that you want to do in life and just adding to it. It could be small things like meeting somebody. It could be large things like traveling to a particular country and drinking coffee at a particular cafe. You could also look for consistency, because a lot of times if you start writing down things like this, you will notice some sort of a pattern. For example, I want to learn to play the guitar. I want to learn a new language. I want to learn, there's so much of learning in your list. So maybe that's a direction that you need to take. Okay. Or I want to meet this friend of mine. I want to meet a particular popular personality. I want to meet, and there's a lot of meeting in your list. So maybe that's a direction to take. So looking for consistencies. And if you want to do it like a more detailed exercise, perhaps the thing to do is to sit down, and I call this decluttering. So it's like a meditation. Have you had this experience where you're just reading a book and suddenly you remember, oh, I have to write down something or check something or order something online. You pick up your phone and then you go into something else, and then you go into something else. And then again, when you're quiet, something else comes into your mind. So this is an exercise where you're allowing that to happen, by giving it structured time. So you just sit down, you can close your eyes, or you can just sit down. The idea is to do nothing and not to have your phone around. Have a small little notepad and a pen, and something's going to come into your mind. Could be something absolutely mundane, like I need to buy new sneakers. Just write them down and then wait again. And then something else will come into your mind saying, oh, I need to call this aunt of mine. Write it down. And something else will come saying, you need to register for this program. Write it down. So this clears up your mind, and that's a good exercise to do if you have just 15 or 30 minutes a day.
Got it. I've heard this from multiple sources, and I've read as well that I think to achieve anything in life, writing is probably one of the most underrated tool, and probably the most useful tool is what I think I'm also learning through my different interactions with people and readings. And it's great that you have also brought that up. I'm sure it helps get that clarity, right? And I think it's a very good idea what you said about write things down, whatever sort of comes, because it happens, right? When you sit, you'll suddenly get all the groceries, especially will be coming to you at that point. So I think it's a yeah, it's a good way. Now um in terms of the other thing that you mentioned was, are you feeling hollow, right? Are you questioning, what am I doing? Now, obviously, it can be one of two things, right? One is I'm genuinely misaligned on a wrong path. The other is there could be something which is causing a temporary dip. It could be it could be even personal or whatever, right? Is there a way you help clients figure out if it's like a temporary dip, or is it genuinely misalignment?
Yeah, sometimes it is temporary. And I think the best way to find out is all those things that I described: feeling hollow, asking yourself, is this all there is? Uh, what am I doing in life? These things show up momentarily, you notice it, and then it disappears. Then you carry on with life. That's a good indicator of a temporary dip. Also, one of the things that happens in a temporary dip, it's a dangerous sort of temporary dip which you won't notice. During your peak moments, like if you're a sales guy, you're having an important sales call, you're mentally not there, you've just switched off, and your body can do the call. Okay? Or you're doing an important meeting or a discussion or an important part of your work, and you can afford to do it. The engine's running, but there's no man behind the wheel. Okay, so you're in that sort of a zone, and when that happens just once in a while, then it's okay, and you come out of that meeting and think, what was that? Was I in a trance? Where was I? But if that happens recurrently, if it's happening all the time, you're going to feel this sense of numbness. You're going to carry the sense of hollowness throughout. Every day you go to office and you're not mentally there, but work's going on. It's like driving, sometimes you drive from office.
Autopilot, sort of.
Exactly. Not sort of, exactly autopilot. You don't even remember how you crossed those important roads, but you drove perfectly fine. If that's happening a lot of times, that's an indicator of something which is more long lasting. And also there's something called heartworm. It's a word to describe something that you think you've gotten over. Like, you had this breakup, and on the surface, you told that person, you're not in touch, bye-bye, I hope you have a good life. and vice versa. Or you resign from this company and everything's clean, but it still bothers you. You still dream about your old office. You still dream about your ex. You still thoughts come every now and then about that person, about that office, about that job which you could have taken. That's called heartworm. And if that's happening, that's an indicator of something deeper, something more permanent, which is going to bother you for a long time till you don't take some action to resolve it.
Interesting. So it's the frequency sort of that you need to look at,
That is true.
and how often are you mentally checked out? Um, Now, you mentioned that you've yourself had such moments, right? Can you walk us through that journey? What were the signs you experienced, and how did you sort of tackle?
There are several instances where that's happened. Before I became a psychologist, I have an undergrad degree in mechanical engineering. And, just to double click on that instance, there was a time when I was working as an engineer and I was trained by this guy who came from the UK to Bangalore, and he was training us on the software called VX. And all these things were new. It was CAD at that time. It was a new thing, computer-aided designing. And I was learning that and I was getting trained by him. And I remember having this conversation with him. His name was Ian Mason. And I went and chatted with him during one of the breaks, and we spoke about music. And I told him there's this guy called Ian Gillan who sings for Deep Purple, and there was this guy called Nick Mason who plays the drums for Pink Floyd, and his name was a combination of both those names. And we chatted about that. But more importantly, that watching him work, watching him train this group made me say, that's the job I should be doing. That's exactly what I should be doing in life. So that was a pivotal moment, and I still worked as an engineer there. So it helps when you have those moments of inspiration to look for opportunities. So when I realized that that's what I should be doing, I started looking for opportunities to pick up that software and train other people so that I'd be closer to the job that he's doing. In that office that I worked in as a fresher, every Friday there was like an all hands meeting, and I started anchoring and hosting that. It was called the Friday Freeway. So I started doing that. I started picking up these opportunities to be there, to speak in front of an audience. And sometimes you have to also be ready to make those small sacrifices. If you've worked in a large corporate, it could be quite shocking to be in a startup and go to a co-working space suddenly. It could be quite shocking to start work in a small office where there's no proper parking. Then, you leave your cars 3 streets away and then walk into the small building. It could be shocking for some people to not have a coffee vending machine in their workplace and so on. So you've got to be ready for that. But I think you will be, if that force to move you in that direction is strong enough, these little things are just noise, and you'll get past it.
Nice, interesting. And then you moved into positive psychology. You picked up. Yeah. Can you explain what is exactly positive psychology?
It's when you say psychology or psychologist, a lot of people think about psychotherapy. The Freudian couch and the therapist sitting with the notepad and pen and curing people's mental problems and neuroses. So that for a long time, I mean, you don't blame those people who have those, for whom, it conjures up these sort of images, because for a long time, that's what traditional psychology or psychology did. It was about fixing somebody who was mentally broken in some sense. So at some point they realized that if you have a person who's depressed or who's having anxiety, and if you remove the anxiety or the depression, you don't necessarily get a happy person. What you get is closer to a neutral person. And a lot of psychology or clinical psychology dealt with getting somebody from -10 to 0. And 0 was, if you did 0, you were a fantastic therapist. Positive psychology was more about, it's a pretty recent field, first of all. And I often joke with people when I tell them I'm a positive psychologist that positive is not an adjective for me as a person. It's an adjective for the field of psychology. Okay. So it's about moving people from 0 to +5 or +10. So you'll realize at some point that getting rid of a headache or a stomachache You feel a sense of relief when the stomachache goes away, but you don't necessarily feel ecstatic. You don't feel amazing. You don't feel happy. That requires work. That requires effort. And that's what positive psychology does. It takes people who are already feeling fine and getting them to feel better, who already have steady jobs and who are competent enough to do that, and making them perform really well, making them better leaders. And that's a lot of what positive psychology does. Focusing
So
a good way, maybe a
go
good
ahead.
think about it is also to look at what's going well and to expand on that.
So do you deal with, you said about getting people from a -5 to a 0. Do you deal with that at all, or you deal with only 0 plus onwards? Like, do
Oh,
you
some
deal with any sort of clinical issues or anything like that? Or even, I mean, a lot of therapy is not even like clinical, right? It's often just
that is true.
working through issues. So
Yeah.
do you deal with that, or do you deal with more on the area that you spoke about?
I'm a big supporter of the fact that if you're doing something, you got to know exactly what you're doing and do it absolutely well. So sometimes I do encounter clients who need therapy, sometimes also who need medication, and there are some clinical psychologists, psychiatrists as well who I work with, and when I see that they probably need more help than what I could offer them, then I direct them to somebody one of those partners who I work with. And a combination of sometimes medication and leadership coaching, combination of psychotherapy and a positive psychology intervention works really well when that's needed.
Right. Now, in terms of, you said about getting people from say 0 to 10 and all of that, right? So, what are some, habits or exercises that you recommend for, in general, for people to sort of build onto themselves in terms of positive psychology? That, okay, these are things that would get you there, if you have, say, 10 minutes a day.
Well, it's interesting that a lot of these things are about 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes, 30 minutes a day, which
Because most
fair.
people don't have
Well,
a lot of time.
you're right, because I was speaking to somebody recently who has an Instagram page where he's selling something, and he said more than 20 seconds, nobody watches it. It's that simple. So if you have 10 minutes, if you have 20 minutes a day, a very textbook positive psychology intervention is this exercise called What Went Well. So a lot of people have a negative orientation. A lot of people look at what's not going well. A lot of organizations, I tell leaders who I coach that as you go higher up the hierarchy in a company, you tend to become a better and better fault finder. Your job essentially becomes spotting errors. And I think one good exercise or antidote to that is to look at what's going well. So the what went well exercise is extremely simple. At the end of every day, you write down 3 things that went well. And it doesn't have to be earth shattering. It doesn't have to be like you completed a full marathon. It can be small things like you got the cab on time, you enjoyed your breakfast, you had a good conversation with a coworker, or you enjoyed playing with your kids or something like that. You just write down 3 things, then you do the same thing the next day. So the idea is to do it every single day.
Every day.
The idea is not to do it on Sunday for the whole week. So what this does is it gets you to, you have to do this at the end of the day. So it gets you to think about and notice what's going well all around you. And this is a very classic, like I said, textbook exercise in positive psychology. The other rather natural thing for people to do is to just spend those 10 minutes doing something that you love uninterrupted. And hopefully something beyond gaming and watching Netflix and things like that. For example, if you love walking, just walk for 10 minutes and just focus on your walk and enjoy that walk and sort of be there for yourself. If you love reading, just read for 10 minutes, uninterrupted, not trying to read while you're in transit and then you have a break and you have to get out of the cab and then giving yourself that time. If you have some more time, then one of the great things that you can do is to get into those situations. For example, when you're in a conversation with somebody, you might get into the trap of arguing with that person, proving that you're right, just discussing, get into conversations looking at or being ready to spot what's going well with this person. Get into a meeting and you know what's going to happen in that meeting. Maybe it's a product review, it's a quarterly review. Just go with this positive intention that I'm going to identify 10 things that have gone well in the last quarter. Of course, among other things, but you at least do this much. Even in terms of, if you're somebody's calling you to see their new office or new house, it's quite easy to walk around and say, oh, this color doesn't match. This is not okay. Just walk in and 5 awesome things about that restaurant, that house, whatever. Tell it to people there. So this is a great exercise on positive psychology. And the more you do it, that's when it becomes a contact sport, and you get to try out what it really means to identify and expand on what's going well. A lot of people who I've said this to, they say that, oh, I can walk through this house and notice all the things that are going wrong. I can be in this meeting and I'm spotting those mistakes and I'm just stopping myself from talking about it. You can talk about it, but also talk about those things that are going well. And initially it's going to feel a little fake. That's because you're so used to doing it the other way around. And even learning to play the guitar, for example, learning anything new will initially feel slightly unnatural. Like holding your fingers in those awkward chord positions is the most unnatural thing for a human being to do. But as you keep doing it, it becomes your style, it becomes the way to do it. And that's how everybody across the world who's playing a C major plays it, in a certain way, and it sounds a certain way. And over time, it's going to become your style. And that's when you tap into the true benefits of noticing what's going well and expanding on them.
Actually, what the exercise you said, right? I think that's really good. I think I'm somebody who likes the entire arena of psychology, very interesting. And even for, I think, self-esteem, this was one of the exercises that I came across, was trying to identify what are the things you have done well. Right, write them down and remind yourself every day, sit and do the same thing, right? Every day, what are the good things you have done, so that you inculcate the confidence within yourself that you are doing things right. These are the things, because like you said, by default, we all tend to be negative, that, oh, these are the 3 things I did wrong or I could have done better, right? So I think that's a very good way to look at life in general, that, okay, these are the things that are going well. Now, in terms of when you work with people, right, how do you sort of help them find out what are they is there any way to find out what are you naturally good at, rather than, I know there are a lot of paid tests out there which you can probably take, you can mention them, but are there any other ways that using things in your daily life or other sort of reflections which can help you figure out what are you naturally good at?
Well, a couple of things. One apart from the paid assessments and things which are out there, and let me not even talk about that.
Yeah.
So one of the things that happens when things are going well for you, usually people are in a state of flow where time stands still, they're one with the activity. You just do something for 20 minutes and it feels like, you feel like it's 20 minutes, but 2 hours have gone past. These are good signs for you to look out for those moments when you just lose yourself in an activity. And that's usually an activity which you're pretty good at. When your level of strength matches the complexity or difficulty of the activity, you're more likely to get into this state of flow. So that's something to look out for. Also looking out for the things that surround anything. So, sometimes you like doing something partially because you're good at it, but also you like that setup. Like I spend a lot of my time in hotels, and I remember one hotel, I was watching this guy in the front office. He was so excited, full of life. It wasn't the beginning of the day. It was evening, and I was checking in, and I said, "Buddy, you look like you're really enjoying what you're doing." And he said, "Oh, I really love it." I said, "So what do you love about this?" He said, "First of all, I love that I'm in the Oberoi. I love that I'm in this front office. When people walk in, they see me. I love dressing up well. I love dressing up well and standing here. I love the air conditioning. I love everything about it. And, every person who walks in, I want to make that great impression and give that, customer service to that guest." So if you see a lot of this, that customer service is a small part, but the air conditioning, the dressing, the name of the hotel, it's all that which surrounds it. So sometimes that will keep you going along with what you're really good at. Also, for people to really find out, you can ask others what they think you're good at. And a lot of times, we have our own blind spots. We're really awesome at something, we just don't believe it. And you will hear people saying, even for simple things like, "Wow, you look beautiful." And they say, "Really? Oh, come on." They don't want to accept that or take that in well. So if repeatedly you ask people who are close to you and they tell you, one thing you're really good at is being there for others, that's probably one of your big strengths. One thing you're really good at is negotiating and having harmony within the group. So that's probably one of your strengths. If you sort of push that a few notches higher, another way to find out your strengths, just look at what people usually seek you out for, especially your friends, your family members, people who you work with, people who you know. They constantly call you for advice on X. That's probably one of your strengths. That's a good indicator of something that's coming to you pretty well. Yeah, I think apart from that, for working people, I would think about, I was speaking about how I moved out of the engineering field, and then I got into training, coaching, and did a number of psychology courses, and at some point did a master's in psychology. And when I was making that shift, I realized that there are days when I didn't look forward to doing something at work. And those were not things that I really enjoyed. And there were days when I really looked forward to doing something at work. Just imagine something like public speaking. If you hate it and your manager's given you a public speaking assignment every Friday, you're going to dread those Fridays. You just don't want to be in office. But if you love speaking in public, you're going to look forward to those Fridays. Thursday evening, you already feel good because next day you get to hold the microphone and speak about something. So look for those times when you're really excited about work, and that's a great indicator of what comes to you naturally, what you're good at.
What if these are things that you sort of have suppressed? So what I mean by that is, as we go about life, right? Like a lot of people, I'm assuming, who are who could feel stuck, could have been doing something for a long time, and so they've sort of suppressed a lot of those parts, which maybe could have come naturally to them, but maybe they got into a different field. Like, for example, you spoke about engineering, right? If you had continued that for, say, another 7 years or 10 years, and then you had moved in, people around you may not have naturally picked up on say that, okay, Vinesh, you could be a good psychologist, might have. So what I'm trying to get to is that if you have sort of suppressed those things and you have sort of naturally picked up the job that you got into by default, but you still feel that gap, is there any other way to figure out, what you could be good at when you feel this hollow?
Yeah, I mean, one, a lot of things that I spoke about are related to looking at what you're probably good at and finding out clues for that. There are also, sometimes we underestimate the power and effort it takes to put up with anything and to be good at anything. So if you sort of miss the bus, it's the road not taken, Jaslin. You can't go back and say, oh, if I'd done that, I would have been great. You can only look back and connect the dots and say, I did this and it turned out well for me, right? So if you already missed that, then my suggestion is it's never too late to start, okay, and to start looking for it. There are people who've started doing things very late in life and done it quite well. And there's this interesting story in this book called, it's by this lady who wrote Eat, Pray, Love, Elizabeth Gilbert. Okay, and I'm forgetting the name of that book. It's probably somewhere on my bookshelves. So there, in that book, she talks about this lady called Winifred, and she's in her 90s. And she sees her at this party, and she's full of life, and she's, bubbling. And so she goes and asks her, like, what's the secret? And, you're in your 90s, and you're so full of life. And she said, I've always learned something new. And When I turned 80, I got interested in the Mesopotamian civilization. Then I read every book on it. I went to every library and picked up every piece of information. I went to every conference on it. When she turned 90, she became the world's leading expert on that subject. There were people from universities who were doing research who wanted to interview Winifred. So Elizabeth Gilbert says that 10 years is enough time to do a master's degree and 2 PhDs. So if you focus on something long enough, you'll get good at it. So that's, if you miss the bus, it's never too late to start. That's the first thing. The second thing is, anything that you do, there will be tough points. There will be tough times. There will be times when it's hard to get through it. Pick those fields where you can, one approach is to look at what comes to me naturally and chase that. If I love meeting people, pick a field where I can meet more people. But one of the things that happens is that in those fields which you like, you're much better at dealing with the monotony, dealing with the tough times of that piece of work. So if you're getting into sales and you're not cut out for it, every day is torture. You might burn out much faster. But if somebody who loves meeting people anyway, they get into sales, and those long days don't seem that that much of a torture, because it's not such a big deal for you to meet people. So one is to look at what you're good at and chase it. One is, how good are you at handling the monotonous, boring, tough, grinding parts of the field or area of work that you get into. And
That's a good way. That's a good way to put it, Vinesh. Now, in terms of progress in life, right? How do you generally recommend people measure, how well they're doing, or how are they progressing? Because, like you said earlier, a lot of times we tend to focus on the comfort part. Yeah, you're getting paid, you have a decent job, or whatever, right? Just the comfort of it. But what, according to you, is like the true metrics, or the true few metrics that help you give that life satisfaction at the end of the day?
a lot of people do that. A lot of corporates do measure, success or outcomes. There are countries like Bhutan which measure happiness. They have a happiness index or a happiness quotient. Well, that's one part of it. I don't want to discount that and say, this is not what you should measure. You should measure the other things. There's a model in positive psychology called PERMA. So one part of it is the happiness part of it. So P stands for positive emotions. So one of the good ways for you to measure how good your life is, the quality of your life, and what progress you're making, and so on, is to look at how much of positive emotions you experience. Are you spending the whole day feeling great, feeling happy, feeling excited, or are you feeling miserable, jealous, stressed? That's not a good life. So positive emotions are a good indicator of the quality of your life. The E of PERMA stands for engagement. How much of your life is spent, you being lost in the activity? You're one with the music. You're working on something so interesting that you don't know how the day and the week goes past. So for people who are living a better quality life and a better life, they have a lot of these things, whether it's running, whether it's exercising, whether it's reading, whether it's something at work, whether it's playing bridge. So the more of those that you have, and if you don't, if you're measuring something, the idea is also to make progress in it. If you don't, then create more of those opportunities. That's the E of PERMA. R stands for relationships. Just look at the quality of your relationships. If all your relationships suck, and if you've lost contact with many people who you were great friends with, that's something for you to think about. And maybe it's time to work on yourself, build better relationships, build longer lasting relationships. So get in touch with those people who you've not bothered to be in touch with. So relationships is another good measure. That's the R of PERMA. M stands for meaning. Does your life make sense? Does it make sense for you to come to office every day and sit at this desk and do what you're doing, or to meet those clients? Or are you wondering, what am I here? And that's not a meaningful life. So looking for work that's aligned with what you like, submitting or contributing to a larger cause almost always makes life more meaningful. So that's something that you could do. And the A of PERMA is accomplishment. Finally, what you just said. In every field, everybody, even somebody who's sitting on the top of a mountain trying to be the next monk, wants to achieve that. there is this sense of achievement. Sometimes it's monetary achievement. If that's what floats your boat, great, go for it. But sometimes it's also achievement in terms of personal growth, in terms of becoming a writer, in terms of getting a better job, in terms of traveling the world. So it's positive emotions, engagement, meaning, relationships, and achievement. Or
That's a really good framework, Vinesh. I'm sure it'll be useful to anybody who's listening to sort of put that. Now, when, for example, say, assume somebody is now joining a new job, right, or has recently joined a new job. Is there a way you can sort of look at your current job to see or sort of audit it out, right? How much of it aligns with your strengths and values? Is there a framework that you generally work with your clients to see, okay, this is the part of your job that aligns with what you're good at and what you could excel at, and these are probably things that maybe over a period of time you need to move out of?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're working a job, some of the things that you could do is just look at. If you're looking for a framework, this is a very simple framework to use. You can have a feeling or an emotion scoreboard. An emotion is something that you just experience, whether it's happiness, joy, sadness, whatever. Feeling is more your cognitive process response to that. So if you were excited in front of a group, and that was the emotion, excitement, think about somebody who says, I was so excited and I did those things in front of the group. Now I think about it and I feel silly. So that feeling silly is the feeling part of it. So you process the excitement and then now you're feeling silly about it. And that silliness could in turn create some other emotion. So it's a cycle, emotions and feelings. So you can have a feeling/emotion scale of 1 to 10. Just check how you feel through the day. Just start by doing this 10 times a day. Maybe in the morning before you start work, a little later, and look at what you're doing. And if your score is throughout, and the 10 means you're feeling awesome, 1 means you're feeling miserable. If you're constantly at the 1 to 3 range, that's something for you to think about. And maybe there's something for you to change in the work that you're doing. And if you've identified what this exercise usually does is it helps you spot what you're not doing well or the parts of the work that are not working well for you. And it's a good idea to make those changes and see if you can hire somebody to do that, learn a new skill, spend some time just making that part of your work a little easier and slowly getting rid of the parts that you don't like. And this, it's like, you're sculpting this stone and releasing this wonderful sculpture from it, which is already hidden. So you're just chipping away on all those useless, boring, monotonous parts. What's left is a great job.
Right. Now you've also worked with a lot of successful people. And what are like key things that you feel like makes them successful, which anybody can sort of look to implement?
Well, it's different things for different people. So I'd like to pick on those things which have been consistent across for a huge group of people. One of them is, these. A lot of times when we're talking about successful people, we're talking about material success, and that's really the natural go-to place where our minds go. And a lot of these people have worked really hard, and to use the typical cliche of their money is making money for them, and so on. So I want to sort of go beyond that silly superficial layer. Okay, one thing that they've done is they're really good at something, and this is something which I've noticed. A lot of these successful people are really good at one thing or two solid things, and that's a good area to focus on. Secondly, they have qualities which work across fields. Like, for example, being able to work really hard on something complicated. That's going to be the same whether you're a banker, whether you're, an IT professional, whether you're a professor in a university or whatever. Working hard is working hard. They have some of these qualities which cut across fields or industries. Another thing that happens with a lot of these people is that they are willing to learn and pick up new skills and use them constantly. They're not stuck in the same place, And that becomes easier because they don't have to be pushed to do it. They love doing it. Another quality I think is also they have some way of doing it. Sometimes it's listening to a podcast, it's reading a book, it's spending time talking to people. Yeah, I think these are some things that come to mind.
Got it. Now, you also, of course, help people go into leadership and growth, right? So, what are, say, some practical ways that you can build self-awareness as to how you are as a leader, even if, or how you would be, even if you're not in a formal leadership role?
So when I meet leaders and I'm working with them, a lot of them do lack self-awareness. A good easy way to build your self-awareness is to get feedback from your group and be open to that. But it's a tricky thing sometimes because you're the leader of the team. They're not going to tell you the truth. The truth comes out
Right.
at the grapevine or when they're out for coffee
Yeah.
or when they're out for a drink in the evening with their friends. Okay. So one exercise which I found constantly useful for leaders to build self-awareness is to understand what matters to them. And it's sort of a journey of asking somebody, what's important to you? And they might say, I need to become the CEO of this, head India after 6 months, after a year. And why is that important? Because then, I'm going to move to a better lifestyle, bigger house. My kids get to go on 3 annual vacations abroad and so on. Why is that important? Because at the end of the day, it all boils down to certain emotions. That's important because they want to feel good. Now, feeling good is one very fundamental value to that person. Once again, you look at what else matters to you, and they say, it matters to me that I learned something new. Why do you want to learn something new? Because I have to be good at what I want. Why should I be good? Because I face a sense of achievement. So I take them through this journey. It's what I call value mapping. And there are, what I just described to you are called towards values. There are things that you're moving towards. There are also what's called away from values. Why do you work out? So that I get a 6-pack is very towards. Why do you work out? So that I don't have a heart attack is very away from. So both these are ways in which both these are driving forces. The towards sort of pushes you away from something. I mean, the away from pushes you away from something, and the towards draws you into it. And once you identify this, you look at your values, you know what you stand for, and that's a great exercise on self-awareness. If you realize your top values, somebody I was working with recently, his top value is freedom, followed by that is excitement, great relationships, or, feeling good about relationships, achievement, and finally pride. So, it's quite easy for him now to decide if he gets a promotion or if he gets relocated to London. Am I going to take it up? I should only take it up if it gives me freedom and, gets me to feel good, not if it only gives me achievement and pride, because that's lower on my list. So if I take it up because it's just a sense of achievement and pride, I'll land up in London feeling bad, feeling lousy, not having a sense of freedom. Then I'm going to wonder what I did with my life.
Right. A good framework, again, to sort of think of things, think of the way, what is important for you. Now, what's, as a leader, if when like you said, right, you might not be self-aware and you can't really um be sure how people around you feel, right? Are there maybe 1 or 2 small things that you think leaders can do to sort of make a more psychologically safe environment in terms of getting the group together to move in the same direction?
Yeah, I mean, psychological safety is something that's being spoken about so much these days. And it's an experience. It's not, psychological safety is not just an idea. It's not just something that you write down on the wall. It's an experience. And it's important for leaders to realize that I've got to get my team to experience psychological safety rather than just be able to talk about it or think it. And one way to do that is to get them to, it starts with you feeling safe. And now I have no way of looking at a team member and finding out whether he's or she is feeling safe. But there are great indicators of it. One good indicator is speaking up. When people feel like they're in a secure environment, they're comfortable to disagree, comfortable to voice their opinion, comfortable to say what they feel like saying. And maybe it's a good idea to start with eliciting people's responses on something at every meeting, at every time you catch up with the team. More importantly, I think the leader's reaction to this really matters. Sometimes if somebody speaks up and you react negatively to it, they're going to probably shut down and not take that risk of speaking up again because they don't feel safe to do it. But when you hear them out, no matter how uh, outlandish what they said is, it's good to listen to them and say, okay, I'm making a note of it, and just move on, listen to the next person, make a note of it and say, okay, this is how you think, I'm noting that down, listen to the next person. Now, everyone said what they wanted to say, and wow, nothing happened. So this encourages people to do more of that. Sometimes even a verbal assurance backed by action, like telling people, we're going to work on this project for 6 months. Do what it takes to finish it. And I can assure you, nobody's leaving this team. Nobody's going to be laid off. Nobody's going to be, fired. And just get them to sign off on that. You see people a lot more comfortable just doing what they want to do, as opposed to, fear of thinking what, at the end of the day, all these fears lead to something big, like thinking you might lose your job, especially when you see it happening in other companies. So when there is that assurance, and I've seen this in a lot of organizations where there's just no risk to your position in the company, there's a lot of psychological safety. And also another thing, nowadays there are a lot of things that just can't be discussed. And I think discussing some of these things comfortably, without taking it personally, without it becoming an argument or a fight, and when they see this happening between two people, they say, whoa, that was a heavy topic. But I like how lightly, casually they spoke about something very controversial. And that encourages you to do the same. Yeah.
Right. You are right, actually. A lot of things have become, it's across the board, right? From social media to everywhere, where people, it's become very polarizing everywhere, right? There is that sense of just sitting and having a discussion, even if you have differing opinions, is sort of gone away. And yes, does make the space quite good to be around when you're with people who are more accepting, even if they might not align with your views, but just having that acceptance, right? Agree to disagree, and that's fine. Right. So I think that you're right in stating that I've myself experienced that the best places or the best interactions are with people actually who have differing opinions, but who are willing to take you down that path and vice versa, of showing you their opinion and you showing them your opinion, right? And that's a very beautiful journey to go down if you both are sort of open to it.
Absolutely. I really think in any institution, organization, family, I think anything should, or even friend circle, you should be able to discuss anything.
That's true.
Just uttering a word doesn't mean that, it's become a bad thing. I think you should be able to utter anything as long as you're not
Disrespecting somebody. Yeah, directly.
I think it's okay. It's okay to, for example, talk about the 3 worst words that somebody can use in an office and how not to use them. But if you think the mere utterance of those 3 words, even in a discussion, is not allowed, then that's something to worry about.
Right. Now, you have seen a lot of people, good leaders, right, who grow fast and things like that. We spoke about people who are successful. Now, successful people may not necessarily be good leaders. They can be successful in their own way as well. In terms of leaders, what are certain habits or skills that you have seen that has helped them grow fast and influence, like become a good leader?
Well, there are, like I said earlier, they have some universal qualities which cut across different areas. And a lot of times I've noticed this, somebody who goes to a great B school, somebody who does a very rigorous program somewhere, it's not the topic of the program, it's the group you did it with, for example. So learning to be comfortable around extremely competent people. That's a quality which you'll pick up irrespective of whether you're studying finance or operations or sales or marketing. It's just
Right.
you're studying it with, for example. They also have some consistent qualities. For example, one thing I've noticed is the capacity to just stick to promises. And sometimes it's small promises saying, I'll call you at 5, and at 5 the phone rings. I'll send you an email tomorrow, and tomorrow you get the email. And I think these promises, they build credit, they build positive leadership credit. And then slowly I start trusting you as a leader, saying that, I can count on this person. And you don't realize this is happening, but it's a very gradual shift where I notice the way a person's interacting. And then I realize this person's being a good leader because I start trusting this person. So sticking to his promises is definitely one thing. A lot of these leaders are also, apart from really being good at something, one of the great qualities of leadership is delivering judgment. When I walk into an office, sometimes I'm working with an entire team, I can spot the leaders who are not that great because they are uncertain, worried, not sure about delivering judgment. Leaders deliver judgment. So if you have somebody, even somebody who's a plumber who comes to your house, or somebody in an office, a junior person, or a waiter at a restaurant, you ask them something and they can't decide whether to give you a new dish because the other dish wasn't good enough. They have to ask somebody else. You just realize they're not calling the shots. So delivering judgment is one quality which I've noticed. It's important that you make those decisions. You call the shots. You decide what to do next. You take a call on good, bad, or ugly. I think leaders are also good at being resilient. And, they are comfortable visiting an area where they've failed before. And they don't run away from it. They're comfortable going back and talking to a person who they had a tough falling out with. And I think that's a great leadership quality. They don't exit the party, block their numbers, quit the company, and so on because of that. Yeah, I think these are some things that come to mind. I think a lot of people, especially since you mentioned influence, nowadays there's a great leadership quality to have. I've noticed with people who I've coached is what I call likability. If I like you, whatever new policy you come up with, I'm going to listen to you. Or whatever working style that you prescribe, I'm going to follow that. Because first of all, I like you, and because you're telling me to do something, I'm okay to do it because you're just so likable and you can't be doing it wrong or telling me to do the wrong thing. So maybe likability is a great quality to build.
Nice. I'm a little uh, I'm a little surprised at likability because sometimes the view that you get as leaders have to be strong-faced, right? Like, maybe emotional quotient is not something that is focused on a lot when we speak about leaders, but you are right. The more you feel that like or respect combination towards somebody, the more likely you are going to follow or what they're gonna do.
Right.
Now, in terms of for people, right? I think we walk people through how can they identify themselves in terms of getting clarity, what can, be good, how they can pivot towards what they're good at and things like that. And also certain qualities which make successful people or good leaders, right? Now, as people incorporate all this, right, there are checkpoints I'm assuming they should sort of have. So you spoke about a daily checkpoint wherein they try and see what went well. Those are things that they can incorporate to sort of pivot their life towards a better lifestyle. Is there like a weekly checkpoint that you suggest that they should do rather other than like a daily checkpoint? And if so, what should it sort of incorporate?
I mean, something that they could do to become better leaders and keep track of that and do weekly?
Correct. Because sometimes you may not really be able to do it every day. You might try, but I'm sure that everybody is going to fail at some point. I
That
am
is
sure
true.
of that. So, what could like a good weekly checkpoint look like to keep
Yeah,
yourself aligned and move forward?
sometime last year I was interviewed uh, on this podcast called Unlocked by Madeline Blair. And she's this fantastic lady. I think it's still somewhere on the internet. Madeline and I were talking, and we both agreed that a great checkpoint is, every day to pick the 3 most important things to do for that day. That's all you need to do. You don't need to do more than that. Every week, pick the 3 most important things to finish that week. And every single day and by the way, these are not 3 things that can be done on that day. These are the 3 most important things, not the easy things necessarily. And if you pick and we have this habit of pushing away those important things because they're also sometimes tougher things to do. While those are the exact things that you should be doing. And if you don't do some of the smaller things, it's not going to change your life much. So that's a good checkpoint. Another checkpoint which I often see is, especially in areas of work like mine, am I having enough conversations? Like one of the things that happened during the pandemic, during times when, work suffers in most areas, conversations reduce. And I think having more conversations, and by the way, these don't have to be very high stake, converting crucial conversations, these are just conversations. So the more conversations you have every day, every week, that's a good indicator. Also, if you have done the values exercise that I spoke about, just look at how much of the week you spent living your values. I think that's a good sign. If you go to my website, you're going to see my top 5 values. And every week I look at, have there been occasions when I had to breach this? Usually it's a no, but when I've done that, I've not felt, even if I've achieved something with a client, which is great, I felt like I probably didn't do it the right way. Yeah. So maybe that's a good indicator and a way to measure your progress. And those are good weekly rituals to have.
And for people who struggle with journaling, right? Are there any prompts that you would recommend to sort of get them started?
Yeah, so I mean, journaling has really picked up steam over the past few years. There are different sorts of journals to just capture what you like to write and ways of writing them. So a lot of these journals come with preset prompts. Okay, so my first suggestion is to pick an empty book. Maybe that's a good way to start journaling, because otherwise you are forced to think in a certain way already because of the nature of the journal. So apart from that, if you are journaling, you can talk about, you can write about what are 5 areas that matter to me in life, and write down those 5 areas. I found this to be extremely useful, both for myself as well as a lot of people I've coached. That's the first prompt. What are 5 areas of my life that matter to me? When I say areas, it could be family, it could be friends, it could be work, it could be, money in the bank, it could be personal growth, whatever. The second thing is to write down how much under control are these 5 areas. So that's the second prompt. The first prompt are the 5 areas. The second prompt is how much in control are these 5 areas. And then sometimes you can also just write. And without a prompt, I think I would also encourage that, because when you write without a prompt, it forces you to look at the blank slate in your head, and it brings out what's top of mind for you, rather than limiting yourself to a prompt, which forces you to already think in one direction and the others are not tapped into. And if you do this exercise about the 5 areas and are they under control, it usually puts a lot of worries, anxieties to rest. Because sometimes when you're worried about something, a lot of people have told me this, I'm really worried over the last week, I'm not feeling in my element. And I ask them, what are you worried about? And they say, I don't know, there's nothing really to be worried about, but I am still worried. So when I get them to do this, write down 5 areas that matter to you and are they under control, it immediately keeps them, puts them at peace. Because if what really matters to me are my family, my friends, my job, and whether I'm growing personally, and do I have enough to live a wonderful life, if all these things are under control, what else matters? The rest is just noise. So this exercise usually, gives people, especially who are lost, who are confused, who are worried but don't know why, who are feeling anxious for no particular reason, it's good to go back to the basics and say, if these 5 things are in place, I'm good. Don't worry. You're sorted.
Right. No, I think, I prioritization or just figuring out what is important for you, I think has been a a key element that, we have been going through. So I think that would probably be a big takeaway, even for me, and I'm sure for anyone listening, is just trying to understand what really, really matters to you through your day, through people you interact with, through everything that you're doing, trying to figure out where it stands on how it makes you feel, and how important it is for you. I think with that, I've almost covered everything I have wanted to. If there was one thing that you wanted to, for somebody listening, for them to take away one thing from this episode, what would that be for you?
Well, a lot of my early life, when I got into training, coaching, psychology, I realized there's a lot of corporate work which is forcing you to do things that don't come to you naturally. So it doesn't come to you naturally to manage people, but you're forced to manage people. You're a great individual contributor, but you're pushed to a level of your incompetence, and you have to stop being an individual contributor and manage the team. And there are a lot of people, there's a lot of work out there where you're forced to do things that don't necessarily come to you naturally. So there's this wonderful idea which I strongly push. You'll see it on my website. I've written about it extensively. I've spoken about it at different conferences. It's called authenticity. So it starts with something larger where we spoke about values. I mean, just look at, if one of your values is freedom, look at if your job gives you freedom. If one of your values is feeling good, look at if your job helps you feel good. If you love to be inspired, those moments when you're most alive are the moments when you're most inspired. Look at if your life gives you enough opportunity to experience those values. So I think the more you do this, in a larger sense, the more authentic you are, because you're living a life that's aligned even with itself, with yourself. The other thing is also these small moments of authenticity. Like, are you in a meeting and are you really sitting the way you're sitting? Sometimes we are in a meeting and we're forced to sit in a certain way because that's how you're supposed to sit in that meeting. So giving yourself the space and the freedom and just checking if you're doing things the way you want to do things, even speaking. I end up meeting a lot of people and watching them while they're speaking, either in a meeting or on stage, or I'm waiting for my turn and somebody else is speaking before me, whatever. And there's a lot of put onness, if you like. Somebody who says, "Good morning, everybody. Are you ready?" I mean, this is not real. This is not who you are. So just tapping into yourself and thinking about, how would I like to say good morning to this group or to this person I'm meeting, and being exactly that person. And I think that's a great quality to have, because you don't, all of us realize at some point that you just don't have to be anybody else. I'm this guy who's 5 feet 8 inches. I'm bald, and this is the way I dress, and this is the way my office looks, and this is it. Take it or leave it. And this creates a lot of comfort, and sort of grounds you. So it's a fantastic quality to have, to keep that idea in mind of checking through the day. Are you doing what you really want? Are you doing what I've often heard in companies saying, no, the CEO said this, or the MD said this. And I asked them, what do you say? What do you think about this? And sometimes they've not even thought about it, because you've sort of washed away your true preferences in the process of working for something or a project or whatever it is. It's a good idea for you to be authentic. Think about what matters to you, and it waters down to your actual values. Are you living by those values? Are you expressing those values every day? And secondly, even those micro moments, like even if you're out in a restaurant, don't be pressurized to order a dish that you don't like just because you're in a sushi.
I know I'm on a call. I'm not finished. I'll finish in 5 minutes. Go. I'm so sorry.
That's authentic, by the way. I don't think you should, remove this part of the recording. That's truly authentic. This is it. At 1:25, your doctor might walk in and say, "Hey, what's going on?" And this is the real nature of the podcast. And let's not let that fade away. So that's really the one thing which I'd like people to take back from this, is to be authentic, be who they are, and to live by that. And yeah.
Vinesh, can it also be taken in in a manner, because sometimes I feel, especially, you know, the younger generation now, like I said, I'm mentally a little old, I feel like, but the younger generation is a bit, I don't know, sometimes I feel, are they too pampered that they don't want to do anything that they are not comfortable? Because is that really possible? For example, like at least I have a daughter, and I often say that I feel that anything that you want to achieve in life, there are things that you will have to do to achieve that which you may not like. There will be few things, right? Like if you want to become a singer, maybe you will have to work as an assistant to a singer, and
Right.
all you will be going and is getting coffee to that singer. Does that give you meaning? No. Does that give you purpose? No. But it is also going to give a part of you the learning and the exposure that could eventually help you reach
Right.
where you could choose what you want to do, and you could be authentic. So is that really possible to be that from sort of day one, to look at what you're comfortable and do only that?
Well, it's one way to look at, I'll give you both versions of this answer. And one way to look at it is, if there's, I wrote an article about this some years ago called the umbrella theory of loving and hating what you do. So it essentially says that if you like that larger thing so much, then you might have to, if you have a clear why, the number of things which come in between will be things that you find difficult, but you don't mind doing it because it's going to help you get to your final destination. And you feel aligned. You don't feel misaligned. Like I was giving you the example of the guitar and holding those chords. So if you want to stand on stage and that's your dream, and it's your true dream, you're not doing it for somebody else. If you're doing it for someone else, when you get to those moments when you have to hold those chords, when you have to do those difficult parts, you're going to think, is this really worth it? What am I doing? But if you're gunning for a direction that you want to go in, you're not going to have that feeling, because all this is part of this game. Like Arnold Schwarzenegger said, people asked him when he was lifting those heavy weights, why do you keep smiling? He said, because I know every time I'm lifting this, it's getting me closer to becoming, Mr. Universe. So that's the one of the ways to look at it. The other element is also, sometimes the things that you might end up doing, you have a skewed vision of it. So I encourage a lot of people, and this is more than authenticity, this is just a form of ignorance. So like I have a friend who's who's a musician, and he worked with this very popular musician, and I don't want to name him. So he went to Mumbai and he started working with him. But when he saw his lifestyle, he was on the road to getting there. When he saw his lifestyle, he said, I don't think I want this. I don't want to be living out of a suitcase, doing a gig in every city, and being with my family just 2 or 3 days a month. That's not worth it. So sometimes I encourage people to find somebody who's already doing what you think you want to do and take them out for coffee, and meet 5 people for coffee like that every month. You'll get a sense of your direction. And sometimes you absolutely love being there, and you're going to get closer to it because you're constantly meeting these people, talking to them, surrounding yourself by them, getting connected with them. Sometimes you might meet somebody who's the next big designer in your city. You're trying to become one, and you realize that that's not the life you really want. And maybe you hate being that designer eventually and working alone, when what you really like is to work for a design firm with a group of about, with a large team. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that overall picture does make sense, because like you said, I think a lot of people sometimes end up looking at it in a very skewed manner, and that sort of creates a lot more misalignment, because you then, there are only 5 things that you're okay to do, and it's not going to get you closer to that larger vision if you have a larger vision. All right, Vinesh, I had a wonderful time talking to you, and I learned a lot. And I'm hoping everybody who's listening is also able to carry away at least a few things which will help them improve their lifestyle. So thank you so much for being a part of the podcast and this conversation. It was lovely to have you, Vinesh.
Thanks, Jaslin. Thanks for picking up and probing on some things which I think a few people in my earlier interviews have done. And I really hope your audience finds value in it too. Thank you.